never knew what they could do. I can't believe that you're in love with me. You're telling everyone I know I'm on your mind each place we go. They can't believe you're in love with me. I have always placed you far above me. I just can't imagine that you love me. And after all is said and done, to think that I'm the lucky one, I can't believe that you're in love with me. I can't believe that you're in love with me. I can't believe that you're in love with me. Oh, I've always placed you far above me. I just can't imagine that you love me. And after all is said and done, to think that I'm a lucky one, I can't believe that you're in love with me.
Good afternoon, Fort Jackson team and our Fort Jackson families, both internal and external, to our installation. Welcome you to our 6th town hall focused on COVID-19. And I appreciate all of you for joining us and taking this time and opportunity to be updated and informed today. So similar to last week, and again, as a reminder, we're going to do these town halls every week on Thursday at 15:30 military time or at 3:30 standard civilian time. I have the same team that I had with me last week, and we'll continue to rotate this team around as information changes. So to my right, your left is Colonel Chad Koenig, who is our MEDAC, our Medical Activity Commander. To his left is Colonel Wes Hankins, our Garrison Commander here at Fort Jackson. And then to my right, correction, my left, your right, is Colonel J.C. White, the commander of the 193rd Infantry Brigade. So since we started our town halls on the 5th of March, information changes rapidly every day, if not hourly. The one thing that I've said all along is information now has a shelf life of about 24 hours. So it is key and pertinent to us that we do this every week to at least bring us all together, make sure we're all informed and on the same sheet of music, because things change so rapidly every single day. I do want to start by thanking all of our medical providers and first responders that are out there, and to say thank you, and words could not express how thankful we are for those out there that are doing yeoman's work with regard to taking care of those that are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and going through various stages of illness with the virus. But we just can't thank them enough for being on the front line in this fight against COVID-19. As soldiers, many of you know, we take an oath to our country to support and defend the Constitution of our great nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we do that, and the way we do that is by protecting our force so that we can protect our mission. We train our nation's most precious resource, your sons and daughters, is another way that we do our part. And then we remain ready, because our nation will never ask us if we're ready, they will expect it. So part of what we're going to go through today, and we really want to get to question and answers, so as we go, we change how we're approaching these town halls, and that was one of the big voices heard. So we hear you with your questions. We'll spend more time on question and answer. But I want to go through a few slides as our normal routine, just to make sure some things are clearer to you in visuals. So I'll go to the first slide, and I'll only go through a few slides today and then go around the table. But in the first one, if you're looking at it now, it says meeting information needs. And that's part of what these town halls are about. From day one, I have committed to informing you. My team will inform you and be transparent with the information that we have. But the challenge that we face every single day is balancing all those elements out there that we have to inform. The external families that are out there, those that have a soldier in training and friends of Fort Jackson. You look at the local families, our families here that reside on the installation, and those that are local, as well as our local community and our veterans and our retirees, and we have a very large population around Fort Jackson. And then at the very top, informing our workforce. And sometimes it's a perspective of when we say workforce, there's parts of the workforce that see themselves as excluded, but that's not the case. Our workforce includes our drill sergeants, our leaders and cadre, our civilians, and our contractors. So our goal is to try to balance ourselves right in the middle of that, because we can't err on the side of just informing one part of that triangle with those audiences that we need to keep informed. So that's the challenge, but we'll continue to wrestle with that challenge every single week. But our goal is to be right in the middle and give everybody what they need, the information that we owe you, the information that we think you should have, and to continue to update you on those things. I'll go to the next slide, please. Transparency. I've talked all along about being transparent. To date, as of 25 March, we have 4 confirmed positive cases at Fort Jackson. And that's the key number that I said from our first town hall on the 5th of March that we would share with you, and we will continue to share those numbers with you. I will tell you, the one thing that we talked about is being opposed, that would oppose our success in all of this, is rumor, hearsay, and those type things. So I can tell you for a fact that there's a rumor out there that we have 5 cases, which is absolutely not true. There is a case of a 5th COVID positive, but it is not from a worker or anybody in our workforce or our families here on Fort Jackson. That occurred with a CYS worker whose father did test positive for COVID-19. Our CYS notified the parents, the families that had contact with that worker. The father, again, lives off the installation, so does the worker. The worker was out of work for about a week plus before those results came back, and we closed our CYS on our CDCs on the 20th of March. So again, just within the timeline, that person had no to minimal contact with CYS during that duration that our father was being tested and waiting on test results. But to make it very clear to everyone, we have 4 positive cases here in our workforce, in our total population here at Fort Jackson. The things that I've listed up there, we will continue to train. That is typically the key question that we're always asked, but you have to understand our environment. That is not a call for me to make, nor is it anything to blame. That call comes from the Secretary of Defense with all of our armed forces in terms of what we do, but it's linked to our mission. And nobody has said, and from day one, that we will stop doing our mission. Next slide, please. So what's changed in the last 7 days? In the last 7 days, you can see how quickly things change and how quickly information changes over time. What you see at the Army level, the Department of Defense has now issued a global stop move. 7 days ago, we were under an Army, Department of the Army stop move. Now this global stop move still has the same effects and impacts on those that can do permanent change of stations, temporary duties, and all of those things that were part of the original Department of the Army stop move, but now it's global. And it's coming from Department of Defense, and it will last longer. It will extend not only through 11 May, which was the last stop move, but now through 25 May. At Fort Jackson, what has changed? Since the last town hall, we continue to increase. I've talked about how we're going to escalate measures based on the threat. Now that we know we have and are clearly dealing with the threat right now with regard to our positive cases, we continue to escalate and increase our preventative measures and all other measures to detect and then contain this virus as we see cases pop up on Fort Jackson. We're going to further increase the restrictions and limit access in a big way, and that will go to our retirees and our beneficiaries, and by no means are we turning our backs on those that have sacrificed for our nation. But it's things that we have to do to protect our force so that we protect our mission. Traffic patterns will change on the installation. We've already closed one gate to limit access and to make sure that we can screen everyone, because now everyone that comes on the installation is screened. We're going to make gate 1 outbound traffic only, and this will start on Monday. Given all the restrictions and limitations that we put in our commissary, we're going to relax some of those limitations and elevate the limit or increase the limit to $200 per visit for active duty members and their dependents, which is different. But as you go into our commissaries on post, they look vastly different than off the installation. But that's a measure that we had to take to ensure that our workforce and our families had what they need right here resident on the installation. And then on the right side, for the external families out there, last week we talked about being able to ship. We've had 2 graduations already, one last week and one this week. And the key question there was, are we going to ship them to their advanced individual training? The answer is still yes, but when? We have not received confirmation on when we are allowed to ship them, but the answer has not changed. It is still yes. We will be able to ship them to their advanced individual training locations. We have already returned home those that are in the National Guard and the Reserve, with those battalions that have graduated. Those that are still in training will remain in training. And as you can see from both, the thing that has not changed from the beginning is we will continue to train, we will continue to do our mission. The bottom bumper sticker that you see there and how it relates to all the actions that we're taking. When you're dealing with an invisible threat, the biggest advantage that you have is speed and your ferocity of actions, and that is what we're doing to stay ahead, because once things start to occur and they're at a rate that is very hard to slow down, you need to operate and we need to operate at a pace well beyond what the threat is. And COVID-19, as many of you know, spreads very fast, very quickly. So if we don't have the right measures in place ahead of time, it will be very hard to catch up in the time of need. Next slide, please. Pathway management. We've continually talked and reminded all of those about pathway management and what that looks like. So we've changed the inset of this slide and what it looks like and what it means. But I want to walk you through an example of pathway management and how that relates to the cases that we've currently had. You look at the bleeding of 2 worlds. Those that are in training are not connected to the outside world. Given all the screening, all the precautions that we go through, when they come to us, there are cases where The screening in this particular case actually caught those three with our prevention measures, with our detection measures, to be able to detect those that were deemed by a medical professional as patients under investigation and then immediately isolated. So our process works. It's not a fail-safe. There's no defense that's impenetrable, but now we have it and now we have to deal with it. But those that are generally in our pipeline, once they're in, they're not connected. What concerns us most and concerns me most is where I have to manage the risk is where those two worlds now intersect. And it's all those that have interactions, have face-to-face interactions, and are part of that training pipeline and support network with those that are in training. And it's everybody else. We've implemented additional screenings for those folks as well. But if you look at the center of the circle on the left in the red box, those are our current 3 cases that we have. The check mark indicates they've been tested. As we do contact tracing, I mentioned the point about contact tracing is figure out where's the source, where's the positive, and then do the tracing from there. And those with check marks you can see in that platoon element being screened, being checked as well. The cadre that were most close to those individuals were also tested. But you can see there those that do not in that same circle and boxes do not have a check mark next to them. Those are the ones that were not tested. No display of signs, past screening criteria, all of those type things that I can have my medical professional walk through in more detail. But that's how we laid out originally and from the beginning how we're going to handle it, and that's how we're handling those things. And then you see those on the outside world. So we had one case of a student, an officer, in a different training course here. Because of those connections with the outside world, you worry about that risk and that mixture. The cases that we had in 313 Battalion had no connection whatsoever with the other case on the outside bubble that you see reflected to your right. But it's management of those intersection of those two worlds in the center that we're worried about. And that's where we try to drive down that risk so that we don't have this mass spread of a communicable disease. To the far right of that, I've always talked about our tiered system and our approach and how we escalate. We're currently still at social distancing, but we're going to move very quickly down to the full closure. It will be modified, so just in general terms, full closure means a lot of things to many people, but we get ourselves to a point of mission essential, limiting access, further restricting that access to our installation, and further preventative measures being put in place. Next slide, please. And then the frequently answered questions. I made a special point to highlight this is not frequently asked questions, but questions that we've answered over time. It all depends on where you sit in the different audience populations out there that we're trying to meet those needs and inform you of. I won't answer these questions, but we'll answer them as we go throughout and as the panel comes up. But still, we appreciate your questions. We appreciate the questions that you ask. But one that is highlighted up there is why do we continue to train? And we've continued to answer that question, but we will continue to do that. That is what our nation expects to do. The one thing that I would ask you all, if you could visualize and understand along with me, is how our enterprise works. The training and doctrine enterprise, the shipping of recruits to us dictates our ability to train, and then our ability to ship soldiers to their advanced individual training is all connected. So if the shipping of recruits to us, if that stops, which that decision is now on the table at the Secretary of Defense level, and we won't know until a few days of what that decision is, then we're going to continue to train. Whether that stops or not, we will still have to train those that are currently in our training pipeline and further ship those or pass those on to their advanced individual training. So we're all connected in this, and we all have to be on the same sheet of music with regard to getting those soldiers through our entire pipeline onto their first unit of assignment. We all have to be in sync. So that is not a call that I can make independently of our system to say we can stop training, but even if we were to stop, we still have soldiers here. We still have soldiers, our nation's most precious resource, that we will have to still train, still take ownership of, and still take care of the way our nation expects it and the way all of our families and all of you out there expect us to, as well as taking care of our workforce. And then frequently voice things. And it is times like this where emotions run high. And I think that's where you see the words reflected in red at the bottom, what's frequently voiced, is due to those emotions. And emotions are high, and there's a level of anxiety, a level of panic out there. And it's very sorry to say that when you see or hear certain things that are directed at a lot of directions, again, we have to address those as well. But things that, not concerned about families or alienating certain populations, which is not the intent. As we look at this is all about all of us fighting a threat that is upon us. We talked about it never being a case of if, it was a matter of when, and that when happened to us Monday. So all we can do is reduce the panic, reduce the anxiety, reduce the fears to let everybody know that I'm all in, my team is all in to doing the best we can possibly do to do our mission and protect our total force. Next slide, please. And it looks like this. So just so you get a graphical depiction of it, with Gulliver's Travel, there's a giant that we're trying to keep down. As Muhammad Ali once said, the hands can't hit what the eyes can't see, but if we can slow it down, then we can tie it down, and we can get our arms around this threat that's out there. But panic is not going to help. Instilling fear and fomenting rumors will not help us at all in this case. We need every hand on a rope. And some of the things that you can see up there is some people are going to admire the problem, which we're never going to be in the seat to admire the problem. But there are those that might and like to admire the problem that is upon us or ignore it altogether. And that's something that we cannot and will not do. And then the panic and the fear. We have to reduce that as much as possible. And then there's critics. There's always going to be a critic in terms of what I do and what the team does and the actions that we take. I've said it before, there's never a perfect decision. At the end of the day, we want to be more right than we are wrong. But we will continue to stay aggressive dealing with this threat. We will be active, and we will implement the measures that we have to get this giant of COVID-19, to get it down. But we ask for everybody's help to put a hand on a rope. It's going to take all of us to get this giant on the ground, tie it down, and stop the spread. So with that, we'll do a quick loop around the team I have at the table for any updates they have, and then we will spend the rest of the hour that we have allocated, which is now probably about 40 minutes or so, with just questions and taking your questions and providing you the answers that you want and the answers.
Thank you. So just to reiterate something that General Beagle said about the process and about the success of the process, with the 3 individuals that we speak of that tested positive, 2 of those, or the 4 individuals, sorry, 2 of those 4 individuals were actually already in quarantine because they were picked up as part of our tracer. And so we had already known that they were a risk. We had already quarantined them, and that allowed us to protect the overall population from exposure. So a couple things from the Moncrief footprint. Moncrief will continue to make medical care available to you. So as we try to meet your healthcare needs, we ask that you do keep CDC guidelines in mind, which are to limit exposure. And so with that being said, we ask you to look at all your routine appointments and make a determination on if now is the right time to go out in public, leave your house to accomplish that appointment. If it is, we will gladly accommodate you. If it's not, just call us and we'll gladly reschedule. We are also trying to heavily leverage virtual appointments. Some of those will be by telephone, some of those will be by video. And so if you are more than free to call and ask us if we have a virtual option available. So that way we can help you stay in your home and stay safe, but still provide you the medical care that you need. Feel free to call the nurse advice line, especially if you have symptoms that you consider to be or that you feel may be related to COVID-19. And the number is 1-800-TRICARE, but we'll also post that on the Fort Jackson and MEDAC websites, 1-800-TRICARE. And they actually will walk you through the process, and they might tell you that, yes, you do have symptoms, but in your case, it's best if you stay home and self-quarantine yourself. Or they may tell you or ask you to come into the clinic. We will be slowly moving some more of our services out to the medical home, and that is secondary to some of the restrictions that are coming up when it comes to access to the installation. But if you are one of those individuals that will now have an appointment out at our medical home, we will call you, we will notify you of that, and we will give you the address and the best contact numbers in order to make sure that you can make it to your appointment. We're also going to be changing select services. Rather than give an entire list, we'll publish those on the Fort Jackson website as well as ours. But what you'll see as a overall theme is, again, some services will go to virtual only, and then others we're going to limit a little bit based on looking at what is a routine service and what can possibly wait until after we get over the curve when it comes to COVID-19. Sir, pending your questions?
Thanks, Chad.
Good afternoon. My name is Colonel Wes Hankins, and I'm the Garrison Commander. Thank you again just for your patience, your understanding, and your continued cooperation as we continue to try to keep pace with the environment as quickly as it's changing. As we move forward, we're going to continue to remain focused on community protection to ensure everyone's health and safety, integrating essential installation services that are required to support the community and Fort Jackson training mission, and effective communication, both internal and external, to Fort Jackson to ensure we remain informed in a rapidly changing environment. To highlight some of the changes over the last 48 hours, for a commissary, we've been able to increase limits to $200 per active duty family as the stocks have remained consistent due to the previous measures that have taken place. We're also increasing purchase quantities on fresh meat and dairy products in order to better provide services to the families that need to be able to shop there. For the workforce, in order to protect our workforce better through social distancing, we have reduced the garrison workforce to essential personnel only, which means a reduction in delays in some of the personnel support services. Some examples of some of those delayed services will be within the Department of Human Resources, where our ID card services are currently appointment only. So we encourage you to make those appointments online. That will increase the amount of dispersion in the wait rooms within these environments. For our Army Community Services, we've reduced family relocation services to appointment only, and we are also providing virtual Army Emergency Relief Assistance. So to keep up with all of the different services and the changes that are occurring, they're all posted to each of the websites for each of those service providers, as well as the Fort Jackson webpage COVID-19 website. Although our workforce is reduced, we're going to continue our essential life support and force protection services, which will remain fully manned. All utilities and public works, our gate security guards, our military police, and our other first responders will continue to remain fully manned. As we look at the next 72 hours, we're continuing to implement several measures to increase that force protection. These primarily affect our retiree population. For our gate access, effective on Monday, the 30th of March, retirees will no longer have access to the installation with their dependents. However, these retirees who are waterfall residents and live in our on-post housing will continue to have access to the installation. The rosters for those waterfall residents have already been provided to our security guards so that they know who those individuals are. Also, for the commissary, we're reducing the support to active duty only and their dependent families. However, those retirees, again, who live in our waterfall residence will also continue to have access to the commissary, and those waterfall resident rosters have already been provided to them. Sir, pending your questions, I'll be followed by Colonel.
Thanks, Wes, sir. Sir, first I'll give an update on the 3 positive trainees from Bravo 313th. I actually went and visited and talked with them today. They're in good spirits, and believe it or not, their first question to me was, when can they get back and join the rest of their new soldiers in Bravo Company? But they're recovering fine right now underneath medical care. So reference some reactions to the first 3 positives that we did have in that one company in 313. So after the contact tracing was done by Colonel Koenig's medical personnel, there were 10 additional trainees that were tested and are now in isolation, as well as 7 cadre members, a couple drill sergeants, a couple platoon leaders, and some training room NCOs. They were also tested. And all 17 of those are now isolated. The trainees are isolated where the other trainees are held under medical observation. And the 7 cadre members were actually given the choice whether to isolate at home, or if they were concerned about going home for family members that may be concerned about it, then we would give them a place to stay on the installation, because we have that option as a chain of command if that is brought to our attention by the cadre members. As with respect to the rest of the battalion has been on a stop training for at least 1 week, maybe up to 2 weeks, where they will just do localized training inside the battalion area. Food will be brought to them while we make sure that we have this contained within that one battalion. They will still graduate on time. Once the stop training order is lifted within a week or two, we will still get all the required training done in order for them to graduate on time and on schedule. And last thing is, rest assured that all day yesterday, the battalion area is completely clean and was desanitized, as well as the DFAC where that company in the battalion had gone through for the protection of others and continue to protect the force. Turn back to questions and answers.
Yeah, thanks, JC. Okay, now we're ready. Left a lot of time because, again, we want to focus on your questions. So we're ready to receive.
The first question, coming from the list that was provided to us from our families, is when units pick up new trainees, is it possible to have the option for drill sergeants and their leadership to quarantine away from their families for 2 weeks?
So the question was, and I'll caveat, we had one of our spouses, so whoever you are, thank you for what you did. One of our spouses said, we don't think a lot of our questions are getting answered. So my response was, send us all your questions. And I appreciate the collection of questions that you received from some of the other spouses and dependents that are here on installation, and they were all great questions. So the question was, if a unit is about to pick up, is it possible or is it an option for that cadre, if they so desire, to self-quarantine prior to pickup? And the answer is yes. That is something that we put in place a couple of weeks ago. We have that option available, just like Colonel White mentioned, where we can put cadre if they so choose to, and that can be prior to if that's an option, if that's a preference. We're gaining additional space to do that as of yesterday, which we knew that is one of the things that we'd have to have at our disposal, and even post an event. So post a positive case, those cadre that were tested, as Colonel White mentioned, we were able to accommodate them by not sending them back home. Some were comfortable going back home depending on their situation. Some cases, there is no family there. Some cases, there were families at home, and they said, I prefer to wait my time out or do my isolation here on the installation and not go home to my family. But we've made those accommodations prior to, and that option is available. But great question.
Next question, why are we still accepting new recruits?
The question of why are we accepting new recruits, I mentioned the point earlier, that is not a call that resides at my level. That is a call that resides at the Secretary of Defense level. Over the next few days, if not hopefully by Monday, we will find out what the decision is in order to continue shipping new recruits to us, whether that stays on or that stays off. If that's turned off, our mission is to continue to train, so we will still train regardless of whether we receive new recruits or not. The one thing that at the Army level, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army, as well as the Chief of Staff of the Army, is looking at is all those states that are becoming red and more red. That affects the recruiting stations as well as the military interest processing stations, and we have one of those here on Fort Jackson, shutting those down. So the decision is really going to be based upon that.
This next question, what preventative measures are being taken for the Moncrief Medical Off-Post? The space available in their waiting area is too small for the number of people allowed to enter.
Am I on? All right.
You're on.
Cool. So we're taking a number of measures. So as we increase our footprint out there, so the first thing that we're doing is we are templating the schedules in a manner that will minimize how many patients come to the medical home. So you may remember that I mentioned the virtual appointments. So just as a general swag, the way the templating will work is in the morning, half my providers will have in-person appointments and half will have virtual appointments. In the afternoon, it will swap and the other half will have in-person, and then the other half of those will have virtual. So right there, that cuts the throughput by half. Other things that we are doing is we're working to develop a system where when you arrive, you will actually call up and we will do a virtual check-in. So ideally, this will take a couple days to get in place, but what we're working to get in place is when you arrive, you call the front desk and we check you in and you wait in your car. And when your provider is ready to see you, then you walk up to see your provider versus everyone collecting the waiting room. We're going to try to operate a lot of the pharmacy services on more of an on-call system like that also. And then the final thing that we're doing is, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, is we are asking that when you come to your appointments, you only bring along the family members that are necessary to help enable that appointment. And so what I mean by that is if you have a spouse or if it's a a child and the mother's coming along and the other person is necessary for that medical appointment to help remember the data, interpret it, then that's great. Please bring them. But in some cases, some of our patients will bring multiple family members with them, and we ask that you limit that as much as possible, because that also will create that space in the waiting room so that we can keep as much social distancing as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Okay, next question.
Are you considering denying access to the playgrounds? It is evident that not every member of our community practices social distancing, especially children playing outside.
Wes, I'll let you take that one.
Yes, we'll definitely take a look at restricting the access to those particular playgrounds, although we recognize that playing outside and in sunlight, that is a disinfectant for a virus, but we will take a look at ensuring that we have the needed social distancing that is taking place in our housing community and also on our school playgrounds to ensure that we're keeping the right separation of space among those. So we'll take a look at that and we'll provide more information back to you on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Wes.
Is it possible to increase MP patrol in the housing areas, encouraging children and adults who gather to practice social distancing?
I'll take that question, and the answer is yes. Very short answer, absolutely yes. If you didn't hear the question, is it possible to increase patrols in our housing areas, in our neighborhoods, to ensure that we're exercising proper social distancing, not only for the children, but for our adults?
If a single parent or both parents of a family tests positive for COVID-19, can you consider allowing access to post for food delivery and grocery deliveries?
I'll give a short answer on that and say yes, but I will allow Colonel Hankins to lay out some of the options that we have available for delivery from our non-commissioned officer club. There's an option there. And then in terms of the unit responsibility as well to take care of that family, Colonel White can address that also.
Thank you. In reference to some of the opportunities that we currently have available on post, we do have takeout services that are available at the NCO Club and at some of our AAFES food exchanges. Part of our program for taking care of those isolated and quarantined families is that the units provide sponsorship in order to enable that all of their needs are being met in their home, so that there's no requirement for them to leave the home in order to obtain the things that they need for life support. Other opportunities are they can call ahead to the commissary where they can take orders in advance, and then once those orders are placed and paid for over phone, the sponsors for those families can pick up those groceries for them and deliver them to their home. Also, Lowe's Off-Post provides a service there where groceries can be purchased, and then the person who is picking them up can arrive at that location and they'll be placed in the car, and those groceries can also be delivered to the home as well. In the event that our food supplies become restricted in the commissary, there are also means off-post at our off-post grocery stores to continue to ensure that those needs are being met.
Okay, great question. Okay.
Spouses are concerned to have no help if they catch the virus and their soldiers must be quarantined at work.
Okay, the question was spouses have concerns that there's no help if their soldier contracts the virus or tests positive for COVID-19. Our spouse networks are very critical. Our soldier family readiness groups are critical. That's why we have them for moments like this and other things that are needed. But I'll let Colonel White give you an example of some of the support networks that he's seeing his unit exercise right now with regard to that.
Sure, thank you. Well, you really answered it. The Soldier Family Readiness Group and the great group of volunteers that each of the battalions have across the installation. First, it's the chain of command's responsibility to check on either a service member or a family member that becomes sick or just routine business. We do it all the time, regardless of if we were in the COVID-19 crisis or not. But particularly with a positive test, either a family member or a service member, the chain of command knows to figure out and ask that family service member what their needs are. And they are more than willing to help in any way possible. And I know for a fact that our volunteers would help as well, sir.
Yeah, and the only point to caveat is throughout this or anything else, we don't need our families here or anywhere for that matter to suffer in silence. But you have to let someone know, and especially let the leadership know that there is a need. Or if you're getting an answer that does not sound right to you, does not feel right to you, then that needs to go up the chain to a leader. We will make sure that something happens. It may not in all cases be exactly what you want to have happen, but we got to know. Just to put it on social media or throw it to somebody that can't help you solve that problem and more than likely admire that problem, it's got to come to a leader. It's got to get up those chains to leaders like sitting here at this table, and in some cases up to my level to help you resolve that problem. But I ask everyone out there, please do not suffer in silence when you have a problem, especially if it's one like the question that was asked with regard to our families that are here. Next question.
If a soldier tests positive for COVID-19, will the family members be tested as well? Does the soldier quarantine at home or at work?
We'll go to Colonel Koenig for that question.
So are the family members tested as well? So the family members would be identified as part of the tracer, and depending upon what the contact bubble is, and if it's a close family member, I'd guess that contact bubble is going to be pretty close. If that's the case, then yes, we would test the family member also. But when we do the tracer, it is the individual that has been infected, who have they had contact with, how close is the contact, and then are they asymptomatic or not. And those are the criteria that we use in order to determine who will and will not be tested. Can't answer for all situations, but off the top of my head, that on the surface that appears to be a situation where the family member would probably get tested, yes.
What are the recommendations for soldiers who are high risk?
Chad, that'll stay with you.
For soldiers that are high risk, so the first one is defining what high risk is. And so high risk would first of all, on the surface, most soldiers are lower risk. That has to do with the age group they're in. That also has to do with their resiliency. It's how your immunization system works. It's also how fit you are, how active you are, things like that. So on the surface, most soldiers are lower risk. And when I say lower risk, you may catch COVID, but then it really comes down to what will the impact be. And so as you've probably been noticing on the news, for a lot of individuals, if you contract COVID-19, it is not dissimilar to if you get a case of the flu. It's those that are immunocompromised that are in worse shape. And so if one of the soldiers or family members are immunocompromised, that's where the social distancing comes in. That's where I strongly recommend that you talk to your chain of command, or the soldier talks to their chain of command and they talk to the medical provider, because we can definitely look at who you are in contact with, how close how close of contact you are with the person. In some cases, especially if you're in very close contact with people that we're worried about, we have what's called PPE, which is personal protective equipment that we utilize. A lot of times you see it on TV where people are wearing the masks. Those are things like the surgical mask, stuff like that. In some cases, gloves, but not quite as much. I'd rather have you just wash your hands real frequently. But the masks are probably one of the key pieces of PPE that we use depending on the situation. But bottom line, sorry, that was a long answer. The short answer is, if you think that you are one of those folks that are at risk, please bring it to your chain of command so that we can take appropriate measures, whether that be looking at what your job duties are or making sure that you have the PPE that's necessary.
Okay. Thank you, Chad. Okay.
Moving away from our list of questions and going to our Facebook questions now. Do we have a choice to not get our temperature checked when coming back on post? Okay,
I'll answer that question. The question is, you do not have a choice. That is a measure that I put in place, which is safety and health, wellness of the installation, and that is a precaution. The only way we're going to know as one of the screening criteria is if somebody potentially does have something, and the prevention measures with regard to the screening is heavily reliant upon personal integrity. So we can't always go by the answer to those questions, but that at least gives us some level of confirmation or assurance of what we're dealing with, what we're looking at with those that have access to the installation. But it is not an option.
Are retirements and separations exempt from the stop move order?
Based on the orders, both orders, retirements will continue. Separations will also continue under the stop move policies.
Are temperatures being done on a daily basis?
Temperatures are being checked on a daily basis at all of our access control points, our gates, as well as many of our units and locations here on the installation. So do not be surprised if you were to come to any headquarters, any key organization on installation. You're going to be screened. You're going to be checked for temperature prior to entry to that facility.
Will drill sergeant schools be filling the new class?
At present, with regard to drill sergeants and their fills, that is unknown at this point when they will fill for their next class.
How long will it take for soldiers who graduated today to come home if they are National Guard?
In terms of how long it will take a soldier that is National Guard or Reserve to get home, I could not tell you. I could not dictate. That all depends on the means and methods in which they travel home. Some of the airlines are not doing certain routes, but what we can tell you is the date that they're released from here. So if there's a question about when was your soldier released, they should know that. They will have their phones to make contact with you to tell you when they're leaving, but we have no control over how long it's going to take them to arrive at their home location.
That leads us into our next question. Who determines when phones are used in BCT?
That is a regulatory requirement that we have with regard to phones. Phones are traditionally, and based on the regulations that we have, and we can add to, that is down at the discretion to the brigade commander all the way down to the battalion commander level. One thing that we cannot take away from is what the requirement is. As they arrive, they all are afforded that opportunity to call home and say, Mom or Dad, whoever that relative or next of kin may be, that they have arrived here safely. We look at close to graduation, typically the week before graduation, to call home and, again, do another check-in, have a conversation with the family. Those are the two requirements that we have. Everything that occurs in between, if it's a medical emergency, that is always a given, that trainee, if able, will have the ability to call home. Any other time, it's a privilege, and they have to earn that privilege. But many commands, and they do it differently, they can. They have that ability as commanders to afford the privilege to leverage and use their phones on more occasions if they so choose. But typically, there's only going to be 3 cases to where a trainee is going to have his phone: at the beginning, at the end, and in case there is some type of medical emergency or some other emergency that affects the installation, i.e. a hurricane. We'll see it frequently during hurricane season, to be able to call home and say, I'm fine, I'm okay, and then that's typically it. But it is a privilege and not a right.
Will soldiers still be medically discharged?
The short answer to soldiers being medically discharged is yes, they will be allowed to separate and return home.
I have no further questions, sir.
Okay, no other questions online. So we'll wrap up here at this point, and then I don't think, and I'll go around and check to see if there's any other alibi. So Colonel Koenig does have an alibi for the group.
I do have one more little bit of information I'd like to put out to the public. So I know in the next week, especially on Monday, as access to the installation gets a little more limited, there are certain individuals that I've been getting questions from about pharmacy and how they get access to the pharmacy, especially in the short term beforehand. So I know that a lot of people already have refills in. And so what we're going to do, as well as there are certain individuals that realize it's going to be harder to get access to the pharmacy, and so they're extremely interested in how do I get my medications from Moncrief, and can I get my medications from Moncrief between now and Monday. And so in order to enable that, we're actually increasing the hours of both the outpatient pharmacy and the refill pharmacy. So the outpatient pharmacy will now, instead of being open from 7:30 to noon on Saturday, it'll be open from 7:30 to 16:30 or 4:30. And then the refill will be open from, instead of being open from 9 a.m. till noon, it'll be open from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. And so I encourage you that if you have called in a refill, that you make every effort, if possible, to pick it up this weekend. We will accelerate the pickup process for refills. Thank you.
And then one alibi on my part, and it may have been a point of confusion with regard to the Guard and the Reserve. It all depends on what that Guard and Reserve trainee is contracted for. When they come here, some are under what we call a split option, and there's some that will go straight through from basic to AIT. So when I made the statement about Guard and Reserve soldiers, as they complete training, would be able to come back home, that depends on their contract and the options that got them here. Some will be Guard and Reserve, but they will go on to AIT. Some will have that split option. They do basic training, they complete, and they go home, but they do AIT, or Advanced Individual Training, at a later date, to make sure that is perfectly clear with all of those that are out there. So again, as we wrap this up, please stay tuned with us next week, same time at 3:30 p.m. We will continue to post. We will continue to provide you updates on social media. And at the speed of social media, we're right on pace with the pace of COVID-19, because it is very fast. It spreads very rapidly. And we want to do our best to make sure you're informed with the information that you need, the information that you desire. Granted, we cannot answer all the questions that you may have for us, but that's the goal. That is always a goal, and that is one of the top priorities from my level all the way up to the 4-star level, to ensure that you're informed of everything that you need to know about. So thank you for your understanding. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your cards and letters, and continue those coming in. We owe you what we owe you, and we owe you taking care of your soldier, whether it be a soldier in training or a cadre member or a family member. And my goal and my commitment to you is to do that at the best we possibly can, at the best, and give our best effort every single day to do that. We're all in. We're all in to stop the spread of COVID-19. I ask all of you to be all in with us. Thank you.